Order. I call the honourable member for Banks.
Well, thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. Well, when Labor was elected to government, Mr Deputy Speaker, and kicked off Spendathon 07, which then ran on for another 6 years, they provided a huge number of examples of how not to manage public money, from the border security blowout to the school hall program, of course, the Pink Bats program, and many more. But none of them, Deputy Speaker, were more grave or more an example of what not to do than their administration or lack thereof of the NBN. Now, this, I believe, will go down in Australian history as one of the single most appalling pieces of public administration that the nation has seen. And to understand the contrast between what the previous government did and what the current government is doing, it's necessary to go back to the beginning, Mr Deputy Speaker, when this project hastily conceived in mid-air, two plane flights, one from Melbourne to Sydney and another from Sydney to Brisbane, and that was sufficient for the former government to sign off on a massive commitment of public expenditure, Mr Deputy Speaker, a commitment which, at the stroke of a couple of pens and a couple of press releases, the previous government said would be 51% of $43 billion. So it was going to cost $43 billion, and the private sector was going to invest 49% of that money. But that didn't happen, Mr Deputy Speaker, and in fact no serious proposal for private sector investment was ever put forward because it was such an appalling proposal. So a huge blowout in costs, of course, and we've seen in the recent strategic review that the costs were in fact on track to be not $43 billion, Mr Deputy Speaker, but $73 billion, an extraordinary amount of money. And remarkably, that this was done in an environment where the previous government didn't even ask the question of where is broadband need the greatest. Now, this is a pretty fundamental point, Mr Deputy Speaker. If you're going to build a massive broadband network, it might make sense to actually think about where is the broadband need greatest. And that didn't happen, Deputy Speaker. In fact, it was only very recently that work was in fact conducted for the first time by the current government. So a massive blowout in costs. And what we got was 3% of Australian households connected by the last election for a cost of $6.5 billion. $6.5 billion, and 3% of households have connected. And then and Labor, Deputy Speaker, had the gall, of course, at one point prior to the last election to say under Labor the NBN is free. It's free. Now, $72 billion, Deputy Speaker, there's about 9 million households in Australia, so that's a cost per household in terms of taxation of about $8,000 per household. And of course, we know that under Labor the NBN was likely to cost more than $130 per month per household. So how one can describe that as free is certainly beyond me, Mr Deputy Speaker. And it really goes to the fact that you need serious people running projects of this kind. Now, there's a lot of technology enthusiasts on the other side, Deputy Speaker, and that's great. Prolific tweeters and people who like to use the internet, and that's terrific. But a project of this size and complexity requires experience and a steady hand at the wheel, and that certainly wasn't the case under the previous government. Areas in my electorate like Padstow, the shopping district in Padstow still doesn't have good broadband, Deputy Speaker, in the middle of Sydney, and suburbs like Lugano also struggle to get decent reception. So there are huge issues that the government will address. But by taking a technology agnostic approach, rather than just throwing fibre around the country in a very sort of loose and unstructured fashion, Mr Deputy Speaker, by taking a technology agnostic measured approach, using different assets where they make sense, including HFC in some places, we will deliver the project much more quickly, $30 billion less, and we will solve the broadband problems that still exist in this country.